Converted Man here. I wrote a post and I thought I'd share it because oh my god, that's not the wait. How do I? Okay, no, that's not how do I share it? I don't know what I'm doing. Sorry. Okay, let's try that again. Yeah, I could just read it. I mean, okay. So I wrote this somewhere else. If you want to know what video it was under, it's just some guy like, Jesus came back from the dead because blah, 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 blah. Nothing was said that was real or true or coherent or logical or anything. And I'm like, whatever, you got faith, not facts. My typical, like, jaded response that I do when I'm in a hurry. Because I was, like, searching for content to comment on in a video format, like, I've done. And his wasn't really worth doing anything with. It was just jaded comment, boom, next, anyways. But he said, my logic and my reason. What does your logic and reason have to say on the following things? And he created a list. So that's the background of this, I suppose. And then I thought I'd share this because, I thought it was really good what I wrote. And then I thought, it's so good, I need to read it. It's not enough to just post it on my post thing. I'm going to read it. And then I'm going to talk about it. And, whatever. I don't know. So I corrected him on calling it my logic because logic doesn't belong to anybody. Reason, well, there is my reason, but there's also the philosophical reason. And so that's what I'm thinking of when I wrote that. But whatever. Anyways, logic, however, belongs to no one. It's similar to math. In this case, logic here refers to informal logic because that's the study of arguments made. In the video, you give several arguments that have many logical fallacies in them. Also historical fallacies, but whatever. Yeah, historical, I mean, it's just written a long time ago. I don't know. Anyways, once identify a logical fallacy results in the conclusion being one we can't be sure of. It might be true, it might be false. We can't know, so we have to be skeptical of it. We hold it in judgment. And if we're talking about informal logic, then asking me what informal logic tells me about anything other than an argument would be an error. So I grant that I didn't make the type of logic I was talking about clear, but let's see if that question would work with any type of logic. Oh, yeah. So here's the types of logic from the web. Maybe there's more, and I don't know, but these are the ones it gave me, and so, okay. So informal logic, I already said what that one was. So formal logic focuses on the structure of deductive reasoning and validness. Can't say that word. Symbolic logic uses symbols to represent arguments and relationships, and then mathematical logic applies mathematical tools to math. So could any of those types of logic be used on cause of the universe? Well, under formal logic, the word cause assumes there's a cause, and that's not been justified by an argument. Therefore, the idea that there is a cause is not allowed, and the question is discarded as a loaded question. And formal logic has nothing to interact with because no argument's been made. Symbolic logic has nothing to offer here, and there's no math here, so mathematical logic need not apply. And the same holds true for all the subjects you listed out. In short, the answer to your question is that logic does not provide answers to questions that are not in the vein of that system of logic to answer is what I meant, but I wrote to logic to answer. Oops. Oh, well, whatever. Too bad. I don't care about that. And it's staying because that's how I wrote it, and I don't care. As far as reason goes, well, that only helps if one is reasonable. Now, I'm not sure I'm always reasonable. In fact, I know it can be a bit jaded at times. Just a little, But in the reason sense, it's not my personal reason. It's more of a way of looking at the world, ideally speaking. To use what data is known or can be known, use the best methods we have for getting that data. For the example you listed, origin of life, that can be studied via abiogenesis, and I direct you towards that subject to learn more about it. You mentioned cause of the universe. Well, that would be cosmology. Different ideas about this are around. It's hard to tell which one is correct, even for the scientists. there might be no cause. We don't know, and there's not any method that is agreed on to get to that answer. There's many problems that cosmology faces and many mysteries to be solved. Mathematics plays a key part of making many of the cosmological models, so at least you would have mathematical logic being used there. And I said it out loud differently than I wrote it, but whatever, it doesn't matter. However, the answer is we don't know if there is what I meant to write, if there even is a cause, and even if there is a cause, we don't know how that is or what that works, broadly speaking. The purpose of life. These are all parts of the list he had. Depends on what you mean. Biologically speaking, it's to make more life. That's the purpose of life. That's just, I don't even know that would be under any logical system per se, but it'd certainly be reasonable. But if you're looking for a more emotional answer, it's up to each of us to find our own. Right now, mine is to write this answer and now to read it, but you know. And after that, will be to do the next thing I do. You decide what you want for your life. No one else can do that for you, and no one else should. And in my view, that includes God. But sadly, people want to give their life away to God. And I think that's part of religion because it wants to control you, you know? And I don't think that even if there was a God, I don't think that it should dictate what your purpose is to you. You should, the whole point, what's the point of free will then? So either we are robots or we're not robots. If we're robots, then program us to do what you want. If we're free will agents, then we get to decide what our purpose of life is. Oh, it must be to serve God because I want to make God happy. Why? Why not make yourself happy? And I did a story a bit ago called "I'll Go to Hell for You." Oh, okay, I'll go to hell for you. So in that story, there's an event that happens where the guy decides that his life is not God, but the woman he loves. And so he decides ultimately his own purpose. And I think that that's what we should do, is decide our own thing. Now, I constantly change mine throughout every moment because I don't think in that terminology anymore. I used to, when I was a Christian, I was like, oh, my purpose is whatever, I don't know, God wants me to do. I don't know. And, you know, but yeah. Anyways, the existence for God. I was like, I think you meant of God. So, like, does logic tell us about the existence of God? Or, well, no, but logic can analyze arguments. So, I can only say that the arguments I've heard or read thus far, all of them have logical fallacies in them, and I have to be skeptical of the conclusion. And then I've asked this before, but perhaps you'll answer. How do you even know what God is in the first place? What attributes does it have? How did you find out that info? What method was used to understand that? I hope he'll answer, and if he does, I'll read or that answer if it's interesting enough to read. If not, then I mean, I might comment on it, but I don't know that I'll make a video on it, but it depends. The story of Jesus is boring. No, in the story, Jesus made some logical fallacies. Appeal to force, appeal to the bribe, for example. So I'd expect a human to do that, not a God. So at best, a logical analysis of Jesus' story would suggest to me that he isn't God, and unless God's illogical. So that would be the conclusion I'd have to draw. But logically speaking, there's no reason to think that the character of Jesus is anything more than a character. But I didn't go into detail. He wrote The Path Towards Happiness. I said, oh, happiness is overrated. Be jaded. Nah, you can't always be happy. And there isn't always a path towards it. Logic could only serve to show you what arguments suck bane. So it really isn't a tool that you could use to necessarily gain a path to happiness. In fact, actually, logic might show you that there is no path to happiness. Oh, well. You know, hope for enduring suffering. And I just said, look, that's not within the vein of logic to cover. and reason doesn't really apply here, other than to allow us to be more objective about the events at hand. But our emotions don't really care about reason or logic at times. But that doesn't mean they're not useful tools, just that they're not used for this one thing. And I think that, and then to broad off from that a bit, is that that's where many will jump into, well, you didn't use reason and logic for everything, so therefore I get to use my thing for this. I get to use philosophy for this question, and then I can use philosophy for this question. And what do you mean by philosophy or theology or whatever? It's like, well, you can use a different tool set, but that tool set might not be very good. So just acknowledge that tool set might not be very good, and then proceed to do whatever you got to do. But there are times when reason and logic have their limits. They're tools, but and they have their function. But this assumes, of course, that, and of course the question you're asking is, of course, not applicable anyways. But I'm trying to be honest with him. I'm trying to explain to him how this would work. Anyway, so I do not know if things will get better. And sometimes it seems that they will get worse. Sometimes it seems like there will be nothing more but more suffering ahead. And sometimes that makes me feel like giving up and ending it all. But then I don't get to be here and see the things and do the things. I don't get to see what might happen. Maybe it gets better. Maybe not. The suffering sucks pain. But at least I'll exist, so that's something. I'm not going to let depression win. Life, even at the worst of times, is still a thing to do. Something that maybe is worth trying to do, because who knows? Maybe it will matter to someone at some point in some positive way. Maybe not, but if I don't try, I'll never know. And one day I'll become a legend, as will you, and we all will. And just because our story has an end, doesn't mean that book wasn't worth reading. Which kind of goes in my personal philosophy of the legend thing. A legend's not a legend till it ends. And that's a quote from a song from Pokemon. But I like the song. I like that saying. And I adopted it as my own personal philosophy because I like it. And I think it's true. A legend's not a legend till it ends. Well, what does that mean? It's like, well, the legend is the story. The whole story isn't a legend until the story is over. It can't become a legend because it only becomes a legend after it's done. So the legend only starts when your story is done. So, and I'm not, ready for that. But we'll all become a legend to those that liked us, knew us, didn't like us, whatever. They'll have thoughts about us. Maybe they'll write about us. Maybe they'll say something about us. Maybe at least they'll make a video about us. I don't know. But that's when we become a legend. And well, we might become a legend before that in a different way, but as far as my philosophy goes. So, this list of, does your worldview cover X, Y, Z? No, not necessarily. It's like, does logic tell us where the universe came from? No, it doesn't. In fact, logic would reject the notion that it came from, because we'd have to justify that it did come from something. So you use these tools and you at least avoid the bad arguments, but that doesn't necessarily give you the right arguments either. And that's the limit of the tool. And we all are on this weird journey of life trying to do something that I don't know what we're trying to do most of the time. I guess we're all trying to live, if nothing else, trying to earn a living, trying to, make each other laugh, hopefully, be there for each other, contribute in some positive way towards ourselves, our family, our friends, society, but we don't have to do any of that. We don't, we could do whatever, or we could not do whatever. And I guess for some, they need a guru or a god to tell them what to do. And I guess that is the freedom of being a free thinker, and also is quite scary if you're used to being told what to do. But even when I was a Christian, I didn't know what the bleep I was supposed to do because God never said anything. Of course, God never said anything. So I spent a lot of time and energy trying to figure out what God wanted for me, and only to then later discover I should find out what I want for me. And that should have been really, if God was worth being God, it should be that God says, hey, look, your life is your own, and don't worry about me. If you want to be my friend, cool. You don't need to worship me. You don't need to obey me. You don't need to pay any attention to me. I'm here if you want. I care about you, but do your own thing. That would be more of a non-controlling God. And it really depends on your theology, because there are even some Christians that have a more loose theology that would allow for a God like that. But the God that's in the Bible, at any rate, is very controlling and demanding, has a list of 613 ridiculous things that it wants us to do. Of course, that's not from God, it's from humans, but, they attribute it to God. So, well, maybe the whole thing is just humans. Yeah, it is all just humans saying, what they think God wants us to do or not to do. God wants us to love each other like we love ourselves. That's an interesting idea. It needs some work because it assumes you love yourself. So maybe you need to learn to love yourself. Or you need to learn to accept that others love you. Every now and then I've encountered, usually I would think, I want to say girls, but I think a couple of guys that have been this way, where they would say, I'm ugly. Or this was in chat rooms back in the day. So they'd type out, I'm ugly. And I'm like, or I'm, nobody likes me or whatever. And I'm, no, you're not. Why do you think that? No, you're not. Don't look, why tell yourself that? Why believe that about yourself? Why not see the beauty that's in you? And why can't you accept that I think you're pretty, or I think you're worthy? And they just find ways to self-sabotage their own self-image outwardly and justify it. And then they'd be angry at you that you didn't agree with them. And it was so weird. And it kind of makes me think that interview I had with that that one guy, theist guy that seemed kind of a little bit cuckoo, who looked down on himself, clearly has some mental issues. I don't know if had those before because of the stroke or whatever, but can't imagine the stroke helped any. He had this very down view of himself because he doesn't have hair. It's like, who cares? Like, plenty of people that don't have hair and look fine. Just, present yourself in the best way you can, and just accept yourself how you are. You don't need other people to appreciate your beauty or lack thereof or whatever. Just you appreciate yourself. That's what matters, right? Why constantly seek approval from others? Well, it's a very human thing to do, I guess. But then what's weird is like, well, I think that you are a good person or want to be a good person. Oh, no, I'm a terrible person. Okay, well, you've decided that you're a terrible person, and I can't change your mind then, I guess. But why do that? Why go that negative route on yourself? So maybe God should have told us to love ourselves first. Maybe tell us to love ourselves above God, even, you know? Instead of love God more than anyone else, maybe it should have said love yourself more than anyone else. Because loving others, you have to, well, you need to love yourself, and that will help you to love others. You know, and that does mean flaws and all, because yeah, we're all flawed. We all have whatever weirdness about us, and that's okay, because that's what makes us interesting. You know, if we all were the same, that'd be kind of boring. Unless we're all like me, then that'd be like amazing for me at any rate. No, I don't get along with myself that well. I'd be like, hey, shave off your beard. I don't want to kiss you with a beard. And the other me would be like, you too. Yeah, shut up. And I'd be like, we'd fight all the time. Pretty sure the human population would go extinct because couldn't have babies. So that'd probably be a bad thing. Let's not do that. Unless some of us were girl me's. Not sure what the girl me would look like. She'd probably be hot, though. You know what? I'm going to think about that after this video. Post your comments on what you would look like as a girl version of yourself, and would you date yourself as a girl version of yourself if you're a guy? Now, I think the flip side, so let's face it, there's very few women that watch my videos, like maybe 2 or at some point, and I think I scared them away because I'm weird. So if there are any women, like if they had a guy version, would they date their guy version? Like, I don't know. That's a question. That should be the question that gets picked up on TikTok and talked about all the time. Is if you would date your other sex self of. Man, this video went haywire at the end. You know what? I blame Captive Desk because I just do. I don't know. I went off the rails at the end there. I'm a lumberjack. Yeah, there you go. Anyways, that's all I got. Until next time, ignore the weird part of this video, but be skeptical of everything else, and then stay skeptical that your female version what